It's Thursday, September 7th, 2023. My name is Ashton Ellett. I'm here with the fourth installment of the Richard B. Russell Foundation Oral History Project produced by the Russell Library at UGA. I'm here today in the Bob Short Oral History Studio with Mr. Dink NeSmith. A native of Jessup, Georgia, Mr. NeSmith earned a bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Georgia in 1970. After a stint in the U.S. Army, he returned to Jessup and became advertising director for the Wayne County Press. In 1976, Mr. NeSmith joined Community Newspapers Incorporated in consolidating the press with the older Jessup Sentinel. He became sole owner of the combined Jessup Press Sentinel in 1983. He's currently co-owner of the Athens-based Community Papers Incorporated, which publishes more than 24 community newspapers in Georgia, Florida, and North Carolina. A past president of the Georgia Press Association, I believe that organization's youngest president.
Well, second youngest.
Second youngest, as well as the UGA Alumni Association and Leadership Georgia, and past chairman of the J.W. Fanning Leadership Institute here at UGA. Mr. NeSmith has also served as a member of the UGA Athletic Association's Board of Directors and the University of Georgia Foundation's Board of Trustees. In 2003, Governor Sonny Perdue appointed NeSmith to the newly created Commission for a New Georgia, a public-private partnership tasked with making Georgia the best managed state in the nation. Governor Perdue subsequently appointed him to the University System of Georgia's Board of Regents in 2008, which he chaired from 2012 to 2014. Regarding the Richard B. Russell Foundation, Mr. NeSmith served as a trustee since 1995, appointed in 1994, I suppose, including a term as chairman from 2007 to 2013. Dink, thank you very much for braving the East Side Athens traffic to come to campus today. As you know, we now have over 40,000 students at the University of Georgia, and the roads don't get any wider in Athens usually.
Oh, no, they don't. No, they don't.
So I was wondering, let's...
Community Newspapers Incorporated, not Community Papers.
Yeah, well, okay. That's an important thing. That's an important correction. Community Newspapers, CNI.
CNI.
So let's start with a question that I've wanted to ask you for a long time, which is, why do we call you Dink?
You call me Dink because 101 years ago, my father got that nickname. And in South Georgia, you pretty much gonna get a nickname. You could be Buster, Sonny, Cooter, Bo, a lot of things. Cause I guess I'll take Dink. My dad's aunt came to see him when he was a baby.
Okay.
And she told my grandmother, her sister, "You sure have a cute little stinker." And my grandmother was offended and said, "My baby doesn't stink." She said, "Well, he's a cute little dinker." And then the ER dropped off, and then I got that. And again, in South Georgia, I could be Buster or Bo.
You could have done worse.
Or Bubba, or a lot of other things. But when we had two sons, we didn't pass on that legacy. They've got their name.
Well, until I came down to Georgia in 2008, I had never met anybody named NeSmith. But NeSmith, there are quite a few NeSmiths down here. Where did your people come from, and how did they get settled in South Georgia, coastal Georgia?
We're originally from Scotland. In fact, this summer, I took all 16 of our NeSmiths, my wife, our 3 children, their spouses, and our 8 grandchildren. We took them to Scotland so that they could touch the tombstones of their deceased ancestors in Edinburgh. So we came first from Scotland to South Carolina, then wound up in South Georgia. And my grandfather was a railroad man, railroad construction foreman, and my dad and his siblings were born in southwest Georgia, Decatur County, Bainbridge, where Kirby Smart is from.
That's right, that's right.
Got to make mention of that. And then the railroad transferred my grandfather to Jessup, which is in southeast Georgia, and we've been there ever since. My parents are buried there.
So your father, if the title of a book of yours is to be believed was a funeral director, an undertaker. Is that right?
The last man to let you down.
That's
my
right.
Daddy, the undertaker.
That's right.
That's right. Kids kidded me as I was growing up. Said, "Your daddy's the last man to let you down. He's a Southern planter. He's a this." Well, when I put together,
I've never heard that one.
whenever I was working on the title of that, really, the last man to let you down has two meanings. One, he buried a lot of people, and he was the last man to let you down, but also he was very much a man of his word. If he made a promise, he wasn't going to let you down. He would be the last man to let you down. He thought that a promise was a debt unpaid, and he was going to make sure he did what he said he was going to do.
How did he get into the funeral business? Because lots of railroaders, much like lots of children or a progeny of funeral directors, go into that family business. How did he get into that business?
His mother died when he was about 9, and there were 5 NeSmith children. Granddaddy NeSmith had a good job, but he wasn't a good parent, and their older sister kind of held them together, kept them out of orphanages, and ordinarily during the Depression they would have shipped them all out to different places. But he got a job. He always had a job, but he got a job at a local funeral home in high school, and he really moved in with them, and he said it was a good place to sleep, and they fed him. And so he worked there, and then when he went to the Army, he came back and went to mortuary school.
Okay, so tell me, did you, lots of small town funeral homes, the family lives above the parlor and everything. Did you grow up?
We lived for a number of years in the back of NeSmith Funeral Home. It was a 1-story, and I went to sleep many nights because I could hear people crying on the other side of the wall. In my book, I talk about when you're in elementary school, kids go to this person's house or that person's house, spend the night on Friday night, and before they remodeled the funeral home, the only way to bring a deceased person into the funeral home was on the back porch, and there was a narrow hallway, and the gurney couldn't make a left-hand turn into the embalming room without first going into the kitchen, and then going back across the hall. And so several times I would have friends, we'd be eating in the kitchen, and they'd look up and here'd be a body roll past them, and then they'd shoot it back across the hall. Any number of friends called their mamas and said, "Mama, come get me."
I was getting
But
ready
if they lasted through the Jello dessert, then they're gonna spend the night.
They were going to be a fast friend if they could.
That's right. That's right.
So tell me how you made your way from Jessup to Athens and the University of Georgia.
I grew up in the First Baptist Church in Jessup. In fact, if I close my eyes and think back far as I can remember, one of my earliest memories is holding my parents' hands going up the steps, the old wooden steps of the First Baptist Church in Jessup. Every time the doors were open, the NeSmiths were there. And my mother said all good Baptist boys should go to Mercer University. And I said, "Mother, I don't want to go to university. I don't want to go to Mercer University," because my dad was just standing back watching all of this. And she said, "Well, really, I'd really like for you to go to Bruton Parker, and then move up from a junior college to Mercer, if you want." I said, "Mother, I don't want to do that." She said, "Well, you really need to pray about that." I said, "Well, I'm telling you, I want to go to the University of Georgia." She said, "Well, it's too big." There were 13,000 students there. She said, "You'll get lost, and you really ought to think about it. You need to pray about it." So I did. A few days later, she said, "Well, what did you and the Lord discuss, and what did you decide?" I said, "Well, Mother, I prayed about it, and I thought about it, and I've come to a decision. I've narrowed it down to 2 places." She said, "Where would that be?" I said, "Vietnam or the University of Georgia." She said, "Go Dogs, go Dogs."
That's stone cold, Dink.
because at that time, as you well know, the Vietnam War was
Right.
raging, and
Right.
I was draft eligible.
Sure.
So she was very happy, and we came to Athens. It's 210 miles from Jessup to Athens. In those days, in 1966, freshmen could not have cars.
Right.
So my parents loaded all of my stuff in the trunk of their Buick, and my dad said, that's really too far to go in one day. So we spent the night in Greensboro at the Nathaniel Green Motel in downtown Greensboro. And then when he was checking in, he asked the clerk, said, would there be a Dr. Thornton that lives here in Greensboro? And the clerk said, we actually lives right there. My dad went to elementary school with him, had not seen him since then. So he walked over and visited with his boyhood friend. And then we got up the next morning and drove the rest of the way to Athens.
That's a long 210 miles before 4-lane
Oh, yeah.
South Georgia roads.
Well, it is. And, of course, when our children came, we were living in Jessup, we would come to and fro Athens for ball games and drive 8 or 10 hours and didn't think anything about it. But the idea of a 4-hour drive was a little bit too much, my dad thought. Yeah. So we spent the night in Greensboro.
There are worse places to spend the night.
That's right.
So tell me, what attracted you to journalism? There's a very famous story about you buying newspapers in Jessup for a nickel and selling them for a dime, but is that what inspired you to go to the Grady College, or what was it?
No. As a 10-year-old, I've always had a job. Because my dad thought with my long arms I was a godsend. I could tote 8 potted plants from the church to the grave, before the family got there. I worked. I just always grew up working, but my first entrepreneurial enterprise was peddling from Orange Street Elementary about 7 blocks to the Jessup Sentinel, and you could buy on Wednesday afternoon, you could buy a stack of newspapers for a nickel. And then I'd pedal my bicycle over to Sea Island Shirt Factory, and then the ladies at 4 o'clock when they were changing shifts, you could turn your nickels into dimes. So that was my first foray in the newspaper business, but I kind of took a break from that, and I was in a pre-law program at Georgia, and in those days you had to have 4 quarters of foreign language, and Spanish really, they had converted to conversational. I can read and I can memorize most anything, and I can give it back to you, but the speaking was a stumbling block for me, and I was sitting around the supper table at the fraternity house on South Millage, and I was bemoaning my fact that Spanish was killing me, but I had a Cuban fraternity brother who sort of coached me a little bit, and then several brothers spoke up and said, well, you really ought to come over to the landscape architecture school. You don't have to have any foreign language. So I went over and I toured them, but they were making all those models and things out of paper mache and things. I said, I didn't like paper dolls and all that stuff as a kid, so I don't think I want to do that. And then somebody spoke up and said, well, really, you ought to come to the journalism school because you only have to have 2 quarters, and if you pass this quarter, you're done with it. I said, that's a plan. That's a plan. And I had my last quarter in Spanish. I had Mrs. Yang. She was Chinese teaching me Spanish, and she said she could tell I was struggling. I mean, my written work, I could ace that.
Sure.
Yeah. She'd say, Senor NeSmith, Espanol is often spoken better under the influence of alcohol, and I recommend that you go across. We were in Moore Hall right up here on North Campus. She said, I reckon you go over to the Rail or the Last Resort. There were bars then. She said, you have a couple of beers and come over. It'll loosen you and relax you, and you can speak better. I said, Ms. Yang, if my teetotaling parents found out that they were paying for beers for me to come to Spanish, they'd bring me home. No, thank you very much. So
no cerveza for you.
No cervezas for me going to class drunk. So I went into the journalism school and I got a PR degree. I thought, well, this will be good. It'll help me with my speaking and communicating and writing. And if I go to law school, this is good.
Right, because law school was still your preferred track.
I was still going to law school. And so I graduated. I married my senior year at Georgia. My wife was a year behind me. And then Uncle Sam came calling. So I had the opportunity to be drafted, or I had the opportunity to join the Guard. And I joined the Army National Guard because I thought that way I can serve my country, I can fulfill my duty, I can come back, and then I can go to law school and make it all work. But that year away out of school, I began to have second thoughts because I was talking to young friends who were lawyers, and they were talking about, well, you know, we ought to make $100 a week or $125 a week. And I'd been married by that time a year and a half or so, and we'd eaten a lot of beanie weenies. And I thought, I'm ready. I'm ready to do something different if the opportunity presents itself.
Right.
And I got a call from the publisher of the newspaper, the second newspaper in Jessup, to say, "You got a journalism degree. How about being in the newspaper business?" I said, "Well, I don't know." He said, "Yeah. Can you raise $50,000?" And of course, I said, "Yeah. I mean, you know, we might have had $500 in the bank account." I said, "Sure." He said, "Well, you come down, and we're about to buy the Jessup Sentinel, and you can run one and I can run the other." And that was Ellett Brack, who was my first boss and mentor, later became my partner. So I told Pam, I said, "Pam, we're going to Jessup." And she said, "What?" She was scheduled to go to graduate school, had a little fellowship, and was going to help put me through law school. We had bought a townhouse on College Avenue, 5 blocks from the law school. And she said, but I said, "Yeah, but I smell opportunity here. I smell opportunity." She said, "Well, we agreed neither one of us would go to our hometown. We'd go out on our own."
Where was she from?
Camilla,
Okay.
Mitchell County. And of course, things are different today. So she was upset about it, and she called her dad, and for some fatherly advice. He said, "Pam, do you love him?" "Oh yes, Daddy, I love him very much." "Well, then he's probably going to be the breadwinner in your family, so therefore where he goes, you need to go too." We had bought that townhouse, but we'd moved out of a 12 by 40 New Moon mobile home. That's another story. Before my sophomore year started, we were having the Sunday dinner after church, roast beef, carrots and potatoes, cornbread, the stuff that my mother always had on Sunday. And my mother said, "Now, where did you tell me you were going to live your sophomore year?" I said, "Mother, I'm scheduled to live in the fraternity house." And she said, oh, you'll never be able to study there." And she looked at my dad and said, "He needs an apartment." Well, I never thought about an apartment. And she said, "In fact, this Sunday, Monday, tomorrow, y'all need to be in Athens looking for him an apartment. The school's about to start." I said, "Mother, I'm supposed to live in the fraternity house." She said, "You need an apartment." So we got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and we were in Athens at 8 o'clock. We were at 8 or 9 o'clock on Monday morning. And he said, "Well, where are some apartments?" And I really didn't know. Well, I thought of one, I think it was Confederate Arms on Hancock Avenue behind the Baptist church over there. And we went in, and the lady showed us, and she said, "And Mr. NeSmith, this particular apartment is $200 a month." He said, "$200 a month? My goodness, you can buy a house for $200 a month." And he said, "You ever been in any of those house trailers?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "Well, I haven't either, but we're about to." So we drove out the Atlanta highway, and we pulled in Flamingo Homes, and it was where Bernstein Funeral Home is today.
Right.
And we met Tom Collins, and he showed us a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and my dad said, "Oh, this is much too big." What else do you have?
Yeah, he wasn't living in it.
I said, "What else?" So we looked at a 12 by 40, had a bedroom on either end, and a kitchen and a living room and a bathroom. And he says, I think this will do, don't you think? I said, well, yes, sir, it'll do real good. And he said, you got a fraternity brother you probably could rent a room to. He said, by the way, you need to establish credit. Let's put this in your name, and I'll co-sign it, but you need to establish you some credit. So the payments were $61.83 a month with commercial credit. Then I rented the other bedroom for $60 a month, plus half the utilities to a fraternity brother. And he said, now, doesn't that make more sense? Doesn't that make more sense? So we lived in that, and Pam and I lived in it for a year, our first year, but then we bought this townhouse on College Avenue, 5 blocks from law school, in preparation for law school. But when I decided to go to Jessup, and again, from the first conversation to the day we were in Jessup was 2 weeks. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I walked down the backyard, and a lady was looking at the condo that they call them townhouses, but they looked at the townhouse next door, and she said, who do you call about this? I'm interested in this. My daughter and her husband are coming back out of the military, and they're going to grad school. I said, are you looking for a townhouse? And she said, well, yeah. I said, well, you don't want to buy that one. Well, why? I said, because you want to buy this one. She came in, and I showed her around, and she says, is there a mortgage on it? I said, well, absolutely, with CNS Bank. She said, well, good. I have a son who works at CNS. Let's see. So we called. She gave me some equity and took up my payments. I called some boys from Jessup who were renting my mobile home. I said, Mike, I need my mobile home. Well, when? Well, pretty soon. And he said, well, I can do that. I said, well, I don't mean to be an inconvenience, but we're moving back to Jessup, and we need a place to live. So he cleared out. We pulled that mobile home behind the condominium townhouse complex, and we loaded up a bed, a headboard, mobile home, dinette, furniture, a black and white TV, and I don't think much else in there, and we took off to Jessup. But before we left, I called James Bacon, who was my junior high principal, and he was then county school superintendent. I did his eulogy. I did his wife's eulogy. She was my junior high homeroom teacher. But I said, Mr. Bacon, do you have any teaching jobs in Wayne County? He said, son, school's going to start pre-planning in 2 weeks. I said, I know, Mr. Bacon, but my wife is,
That's not what I asked.
He said, well, I got one job. I said, well, my wife will take it. He said, well, wait a minute, I'll tell you where it is. He said, it's Orange Street Elementary, teaching the first grade. I said, my wife will take it. I said, that's great, because Tom James, who was my principal, and his wife was one of my teachers. I said, that'd be like moving in with family. So she took that job, and I called Benny Westbury, who had a trailer park. I said, Mr. Westbury, you got any spaces to park a mobile home? He said, son, I got one. He and my dad were good friends, and I said, we'll take it. Well, when you coming? Soon, Mr. Westbury, soon. And we took off to Jessup. So that's how all of that came about. When I got there, we tried for several years to buy the other. We thought they were ready to sell, but actually they weren't. So I turned to Dr. Lanier Harrell, who I just went to his 96th birthday.
Oh, wow.
In Jessup, and Ellett. And I said, Ellett and Doc, I didn't come down here for a job. I can get a job. What I came here is for an opportunity. And I said, I want to invest. I want to be in the newspaper business. So they sold me a 1/3 interest in the Wayne County Press. But fortunately, I didn't have to raise the $50,000. But I needed $3,000 to make a down payment they would finance my stock purchase for 3 years. So there were 2 banks in Jessup, and I went to the first bank, and I said, Mr. Woodruff, I need to borrow some money to go in the newspaper business. And he said, well, I'll loan you money 2 ways. I said, well, I need to know. He said, 1, I'll loan you 10% of your net worth. I said, Mr. Woodruff, we live in a 12 by 40 New Moon mobile home that's mortgaged. The payments are $61.83. We got 2 used cars that are paid for. My wife makes $375 a month teaching school. That's about what I think she brought home back then. And I make $175 a week at the newspaper. Our assets, 10% of our assets won't buy a new suit and a pair of shoes. I said, what other way would you loan me money? And he said, I'll loan you all the money your daddy will sign the note, back of the note for. I said, time out. Thank you very much, Mr. Witter. My father's father didn't put him in business, and my father's not putting me in business. I thank you very much, but we can't do business. So I went across the street and I went in to see Kerry Brannon, who was head of the bank there. And he says, I said, Mr. Brannon, I'm going in the newspaper business. And I want to buy 1/3 of the Wayne County Press, and I got to put down $3,000 on my stock purchase. And he said, son, you don't want to do that. I said, well, why, Mr. Brannon? He said, well, that newspaper's never made any money. I said, well, what should I do? He said, you want to come to work here at this bank.
Oh.
I said, well, how will that work? He said, well, one day you'll be president. You'll be sitting right here in this right here in this chair. I know you will, because I got a lot of faith in you. I said, well, how will that work? He says, well, when I retire, Lonnie O'Quinn is going to move up, and he's going to be the head of the bank. And when Lonnie O'Quinn retires, Linton Lewis is going to move up, and he's going to be head of the bank. And when Linton retires, Pat Brown is going to move up. And when Pat retires, then you're next. You'll get to be.
He had it all figured out.
I said, well, how long will that take, Mr. Brown? He said, about 25 years. I said, oh, my goodness. No, I'm in a hurry. Mr. Brown. Will you loan me $3,000? That's what he says, I will loan it to you under these conditions. You promise to pay it back, and I know you will, because you were raised right by your parents. Your dad and I have been friends our whole lives. And second, I don't ever want to come looking for you. Due dates are sacred. I signed the note, and there we go. To skip forward, this was in '72. Skip forward in about '89. Even before that, I was put on the bank board as one of the directors. The bank was headquartered in Brunswick, Jessup, St. Simon, Sea Island, Jekyll, Kingsland. It was a Southeast Georgia bank.
Right.
I was put on the bank board, and I think it was '89. The bank president called me to come to lunch, and we talked some more about it, but then actually it was at Bill Jones, who owned it at that time, Sea Island Company. We were having a reception for Sam Nunn, United States Senator, and we were at Bill Jones's personal home out on the tip of St. Simons, and Pete Smith called me over to the side, and he says, I want you to be the chairman of the board of American National Bank. You've been on our board for several years now, and our bank chairman is retiring, and I'm going to propose you to be the chairman. And I said, Pete, that's a real honor, but I'm going to tell you something nobody else knows outside of my family. We're moving to Athens. Our company has grown over 4 states. You don't want your chairman living out of the market. You need to get someone else. I appreciate the confidence and the honor, but we can't do that. And in 1990, indeed, we did move to Athens. Our company, if we'd kept all of our newspapers, we'd be about 60 today. But we've narrowed our footprint considerably. But we needed to move, and so for a year we sat around our oak table in the kitchen having supper, and we talked and prayed about it. Our 3 kids were at home, and I said, we have the newspaper in Clayton, Georgia. Let's live on Lake Burton or Rabun. That'd be a lot different from this flat South Georgia woods, which we love. We live on the lake. You go to Rabun Gap, Nacoochee, and we'll have something completely different. And they said, "No, Dad, we won't do that." And I said, "Well, how about let's live on Lake Lanier, and you can see the mountains, and we'll live on a lake, and that'll be something different." Dad, we don't want to do that. I said, "Well, please tell me what you'd like." He said, "Let's go to Athens. We've come to Athens our whole lives to ball games, and that'd be like moving across town. The best of both worlds. We got all our friends in Jessup. We'll have all our friends in Athens that we've met over the years. So that's what got us to Athens this time." When Kerry Brannon was 90, I took him. I called him and I said, "Kerry, Mr. Brannon, I want to take you to lunch." And I put him in my pickup truck, and we rode all around Wayne County looking and seeing and doing. And I said, "I want to thank you. I want to thank you for having confidence in me. You didn't have to loan me $3,000 when you did, but you did, and I paid you back. And I want you to know that it didn't take 25 years. I think it was more like 17 years I was offered the top slot at the bank, chairman of the board, and I appreciate it. But I want you to also know today, right now today, somewhere between 800 and 1,000 people that work in our company with my signature on their paycheck. Thank you too for having confidence in a small kid that had not much knowledge of the newspaper business or business at all, but you did." And I did his eulogy. I think he died at 98, and I did his eulogy as well. Yeah.
Well, tell me about, because you mentioned how you got up to 60 newspapers at one time. That was a fairly aggressive growth strategy from community newspapers.
Well, it is. We community newspapers came to Jessup in I got to get my numbers right, and about 75, looking to buy the Jessup Sentinel. In fact,
which was the older.
It'd been there 100 plus years. Drew Babb out of Spartanburg was building a newspaper company. He sent letters out all over the South. "If you're interested in selling your newspaper, I'd like to talk to you." Well, Mr. Roden, Bill Roden, who owned the other paper, responded to him, because by this time he was getting a little bit weary. And I'll tell you about how we came to that. But the founder of Community Newspapers out of Spartanburg came, and he was very interested in Jessup. Jessup is a wonderful market. But when he got there, he found that his kid across the street down a couple of blocks away that was really taking it to him. So he said, "I can't buy this without buying that and putting them together." So that's how I met Community Newspapers, and I became a partner in putting the papers together. But Mr. Babb asked me, "Well, what do you want to be?" I said, "Well, I want to be president of Community Newspapers." He said, "Well, that's a little bit early for that. You need to let's see." Well, we stayed partners until '83. So about 7 years, maybe 7 years we were partners, and with the two of us, we began to buy other news. He'd send me out, and I began to buy newspapers, and we were partnered on that. But he died in 82 or so, and then the children operated the company with the executor, and then it became for sale. The company became for sale in 89, 88 actually, and we were able to buy it. And there were 50 newspapers in his company. So that's how, by that time, I'd already was involved maybe in 10 newspapers myself.
So you took over CNI, and this would have been the late 80s.
89.
89. So that's when you move up to Athens.
90.
So not too long after that,
Are we going or are we not going?
We are going, yeah.
Okay,
we are going.
I got to get on my game face.
So tell me about when you first learned about the Russell Foundation.
Earl Leonard, retired senior vice president at Coca-Cola. I met Earl May of 1970 at Gridiron Initiation. That was in the old days when hazing was vogue. And he helped dig me out of the dumpster at the varsity down in front of the arch. They had packed all 11 of us in there in our tattered tuxedos. And after the initiation was over, Earl said, Pam will never have you the way you look right now. Go with me to the Key to America, which is down off Broad Street, and you need to clean up, and I'll call Pam and she come get you. And so Earl and I, we struck up a friendship, and are friends today. And he called me one day and said, we want you to come on the Russell Foundation. And I said that would be an honor. It would be, Earl. And as I quickly learned more, because I knew who Richard B. Russell was.
Sure.
But all of a sudden, a wave of regret kind of washed over me, because I realized that I should have had an internship. I should have sought an internship in Washington and been exposed to the great senator. In fact, I think when, well, that wouldn't be completely correct, but I was I might have been the first chairman of the Russell Foundation who didn't have either an internship with the senator or was either a close friend. So
yeah, that's true.
He had died by the time I came along, and I had that, well, doggone, I missed a good chance there. Well, the reason I didn't is I didn't have time to think about it. I worked hard in the pulp mill in the summers to help pay for my college and car and an engagement ring and things like that. And then I was married, so that my life was just, I didn't have a free summer. But
right.
I look back, that'd be on my list of regrets that I wish I could have, should have, ought to done.
But it's amazing how many stories I run into with these conversations about politics and public policy. They all seem to go back to Earl Leonard.
That's right.
I mean, it's remarkable.
He's a common denominator in a lot of lives.
It's remarkable. It really is.
It is. He and later, when I was president of the Alumni Association, Earl is plain spoken.
Yes.
He's plain spoken. He was chewing me out about the Alumni Association while I'm doing a blankety blank thing. And I said, Earl, do you look at our emails and newsletter, electronic? He said, I don't even have a computer. I hardly got an answering machine. I still type on a typewriter. And so I said, well, let's get together, Earl. And we sat down, and I showed him all these things, and he said, damn, y'all doing a bunch, aren't you? I said, well, yeah, Earl, you just not on our wavelength. But he is a dear friend.
I remember one time I asked our friend Rogers Wade, I was like,
yeah.
Can you send me Earl's email address? And Rogers just laughed. he said, no, I can't.
No, he can't. Oh, but Miriam in Atlanta, she monitors that for him. But Earl is, you know where Earl stands on everything, and what a great Georgian, and
That's
what
right.
a friend to the University of Georgia.
That's right.
He's been.
Very much.
And I'm very lucky he's a friend of mine.
Right. So tell me, what did you know about the Russell Foundation when Earl approached you?
Almost nothing. Almost nothing. And of course, in those days, we were down. The Russell Library was down in the basement, in the dungeon of the main library.
The sub-basement, the basement under the
The
basement.
bottom of the bottom. And I knew very little, but through Earl and Charles Campbell, who of course, was I guess he was the chief of staff.
He was. He was the final chief.
And probably has the best Senator Russell stories. He and Earl.
Oh yeah.
Have the best stories because they were there. They lived it. They breathed it. I didn't know much, but soon after I came on the board, the feeling was we want to escape the sub-basement. And the fundraising and the work began. And I was fortunate to be the chairman of the foundation today. We clipped the ribbon, if you will, or dedicated the building out on the front lawn. And I've teased President Moorhead. I said, we used to have the best view on campus. And
That's
then
right.
You allowed Terry College to move in on us. Now we, by golly, we want us a periscope so that we can see over over Terry College and have our good view but they haven't taken our lawn yet.
No, I mean that's a real selling point. And as long as the Bulldogs keep winning, they're going to want to keep that lawn open for all the game days and SEC Nation.
That's right.
So
that's right.
I think our fates are intertwined with the football team.
That's right. That's right. But this is one of the nicest structures on campus, and it took a long time.
Right. Yeah.
A long time.
So those conversations started pretty soon after you joined the foundation.
Yeah.
As a new trustee. Those conversations were going
on.
Well,
that's right. And of course, one of the early things that I did not attend, but they dedicated the statue in Atlanta.
Right.
I mean,
the Russell Building.
Well, no, in Washington.
In D.C.
In D.C. Yeah, in D.C. Yeah, sure.
We have to be very specific when we say Russell Building because there's a lot
of
there's there are a fair few.
Tom Jackson, there are a few Russell buildings around, but when the statue was dedicated in Washington.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell me what you were involved as a trustee, and I think that Charles would have appointed you and Rogers Wade and maybe one other to a committee about developing the Special Collections Library. What do you recall about being put on that committee and the ins and outs and the pros and cons of a new building?
I'm digging in cobwebs, and a lot of things have happened since then.
Bill Norton was the other.
Bill Norton. Yeah, Judge Norton.
Judge Norton.
Judge Norton, yeah. You can't really appreciate this building unless if you go back to the sub-basement and see where
I have a foot in the past. I did some research there as a graduate student,
you really can't appreciate that. And again, this is going back now 25 or more years, and some of those cobwebs are a little dusty. I'm not sure I can dial up what you're looking for.
Well, it seemed like that the foundation was incredibly supportive of the effort.
Right.
In part because if you go back and you read the original foundation's minutes and conversations that they had with President Fred Davison.
That's right.
And Porter Kellum, who was the librarian at the time. The university made a lot of promises about what the Russell Library was going to have in terms of space. And as we have established, they had the back door of the sub-basement of the library when the foundation wanted to have a very, a bigger place, a more prominent location. And this seemed like a way to finally fulfill those aspirations.
And what help me to remember when did we dedicate the new building?
Dedication would have been, because we just had, it would have been probably 2011 or 2012, early.
Yeah, of course.
Groundbreaking would have been 2010 maybe.
Yeah. See, I went on the Board of Regents in 2008.
Right.
And guess who came to see me almost immediately?
Oh, who's that?
It would be Charles Campbell. Charles said, we have us a spokesperson now. I mean, and of course, yes, without I was not ashamed to tout the benefits
Sure.
of a new building, of course. So I got to work on it from both sides of the ledger.
Which was, part and parcel of the Russell Foundation has always been that sort of, there's been a voice for the foundation, the library.
That's right.
On
That's
the
right.
trustees.
That's right.
Now, you come on, and obviously the building is in motion, and there's the allocation of $3 million, which was given to secure the place on the Regents list,
Right.
and also the naming rights
Right.
for the building as the lead gift. And the building, is obviously the cornerstone of sort of your time on the as chairman. But several other things are happening around that time, which is, there's apparently at some point the charter of the foundation had lapsed, and there was an effort to reorganize away from a supporting foundation to a private foundation.
Yeah,
Do you remember those efforts?
Well, I do. I do. A good bit of my early chairmanship, if you will, was getting the foundation reorganized.
Right.
And it was a lot of work. A lot of work. But Charles was very helpful. Hugh Peterson was very helpful. And one of my goals during my tenure as chair was to get us back on solid organizational ground, if that's the proper term. But we got it reconfigured and moving forward. And again, I was somewhat of a rookie in all of this. I had to rely. I was willing to do the work, but I needed advice from experts such as Charles and Hugh and other, and we put it together. But I did say that when I agreed to be chair, Charles, I'm not going to stay here for 100 years like you did. I mean, I'll be for a certain while, and I don't know how long did I serve, 6 or 7 years?
It would have been 08 to 12, and you probably would have served longer had you not become chair of the Board of Regents.
That's right. That's right. I said I can't stay forever, but I'll do what I can as long as I can. And again, now I'm having to dig back in those cobwebs. I sort of suppressed all of that hard work, but again,
like any trauma.
I had people helping me. And but we got the foundation on good footing, legally,
right,
and organizationally. Yes.
Well, and part of that is not too long after you became chair, the bottom fell out of the global economy with the Great Recession.
It did.
And what did that mean? I attend the Russell Foundation meeting every year, so I get to hear the SunTrust or Truist now reports. So I understand the portfolio, but explain how a recession affects a charitable organization like the Russell Foundation and how it gives and supports programs.
Right. Well, we had been fortunate for years to watch our portfolio grow, and one of the issues in raising funds were the people, the peers and friends and the well-to-do that were connected to the senator. They had joined him in heaven or when they were gone. When his generation had disappeared. So fundraising wasn't an easy task. That's why we counted on the stock market to take us for a good ride. And when it fell, it hurt. But fortunately, what goes down usually will come back up, and it did.
Thankfully.
And it did. It did.
Well, coinciding with that, you as chair, but the foundation, requested that groups and organizations receiving funding from the Russell Foundation resubmit proposals.
That's right.
Was that an effort to, obviously how should I put this? Was that an effort of trying to just take stock of where the foundation was and grapple with the new economic realities?
Well, it was, and our appetite for sharing didn't shrink.
Right.
But then again, it's good to reevaluate so that we wouldn't exist on an air of entitlement. Well, you've always gotten it, so therefore you're always going to get it. We wanted to reestablish why are we giving, and fortunately, we had selected good programs earlier, and they were programs that we wanted to continue. But it's just good to not rest on your laurels, if you will, and say, well, we're entitled to this. We've always gotten it. And so I don't remember cutting anybody out, but it gave the new generation, whoever was in charge of those programs, a chance to reaffirm, we need your help and we appreciate your help.
If you go back and look at the minutes, it really does look like towards the tail end of Charles's tenure, and then especially in yours, is where and then again with Chris Carr, time as chairman, brief time as chairman, that's really where you have a massive expansion of Foundation's giving beyond the Russell Library, which had always been front and center to the Richard B. Russell Foundation, that there had been giving to debate, SPIA, CITS with Gary Birch, the law school especially. Was that a concerted effort on the part of the foundation, or was that just something that developed organically?
It just developed organically because we gave the Russell Awards to the teachers. That was one of our signature programs, and we're proud of that. And of course, those young instructors, professors that got that boost in their pay, they appreciated it a lot too.
And one of them became president of the university.
How about that? How about that?
Right?
We invested wisely.
So, I mentioned it briefly, but what was the decision process for you to step away and relinquish the chair to Norman, Judge Underwood?
Well, again, I felt that during my tenure was the primary goal was to get reorganized structurally, legally, and get the new building built. And Charles gets most of the credit for keeping the hope of the new building and seeing it come. I can't take credit for that. But once I felt that the organization was on solid legal ground, and once we dedicated the building, it was time for someone else to take it. Again, I didn't intend to serve forever. And also at that time, I was up to my ears in the Board of Regents, and it made sense to move on. And Judge Underwood Norman was my pick, because I went to him and said, Norman, you're perfect. You're perfect. You need to do this.
He had a lot of experience beyond his just qualities generally for the post.
What a great American. Yeah.
He had been chair of several important committees of the foundation, and the Legacy Committee, which dealt with past beneficiaries, future beneficiaries, things like that.
That's right.
Tell me about your working relationship with sort of the key administrators. It would have been President Adams.
Yeah.
Would have been. Yeah, I think you would have been entirely with President Adams.
Yeah. Well,
the Chancellor.
President Moorhead had moved in by the time we dedicated the building.
Wow, has it been that long? Yeah.
Yeah, I do believe.
I'm getting old, Dink.
Well, I'm getting real old because my cobwebs are getting so dusty that I'm not trying to. But I just remember him. I believe. I mean.
Yeah.
You can double check my facts.
Yeah.
But anyway, President Adams was very excited about this building, and I think he was proud of the fact that it got built.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was with the Great Recession. It was a lot of building projects were on hold.
That's right.
So it was important to get it done. Tell me about working with Dr. Potter, Bill Potter, university librarian.
I didn't work with him on a daily basis.
Sure.
But Dr. Potter was, I mean, we just had a good relationship, and we only communicated in and around the annual meeting. So I can't really give you any anecdotes that would.
Well, one person who's been a constant through it all with the Russell Foundation and the Russell Library has been Cheryl Vogt.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you can tell plenty of anecdotes about Cheryl.
Sure. She's among the best in the nation, if not the best. Her whole life, her whole adult life has been dedicated to this. And she was our Google before there was Google. I mean, she knew what was going on, and I give her lots of credit. And I used to tease, don't you retire during my term, because she's been eligible to retire forever if she wants to.
Next year's her 50th year at the library.
That's what I'm talking about. I said, I know you got enough time and you can retire, but don't you do it not while I'm here, because you are the glue that holds all of this together. Again, she was, before I knew what Google was, I had Cheryl. I could just dial her up and ask her.
When she retired, make that somebody else's problem.
That's right.
Well, reflecting back, you've now been on the Russell Foundation, gosh, I guess almost...
Coming up almost 30.
30 years.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, 30 years means 1970s or something like
That's
that,
right.
but
Well,
unfortunately not. So, in your opinion, how is the Foundation's mission, its focus, has it changed? Has it evolved over the course of those 30 years, or what are your thoughts?
I'm very proud of how the foundation continues to mature and do good and keep the legacy of Senator Russell alive. You know, they say you die twice. First, your heart stops, and we know when the senator died. And the second time you die is when the stories and the memories stop. This foundation is dedicated to keeping the memories and the legacy alive forever, and it will, and it shall happen through this foundation for Senator Richard B. Russell. So I'm very proud of that. And of course, this building and what's in it has taken a special life in the education of the students and Georgians. You look at the number of people that come through this building every day to study, to research, to learn. And then I wish every Georgian could go beneath the earth here. There's as much of this building below the ground as there is above the ground, and I am fascinated, because I'm not a hoarder, but I do like my stuff. And I have things that from the first grade, and all, I mean, that is sort of special. And so I have a great appreciation for world-class archivists who know how to handle stuff. I'm not that good, but I look and I think when I die, I hope our children won't hate me, because I'm leaving a lot of stuff here, a lot of stuff. But it's important stuff. It's Dr. Fannin was one of my dear friends, and I later served as chairman of that board down the Leadership Institute. And he said, only words, and he talked with his Wilkes County, only woods live forever, only woods. and that's we got a lot of woods in this building that are going to live forever, and I think Senator Russell is smiling about that.
What is Senator Russell's legacy in your mind?
Well, you go back to he came through during the Great Depression, and the school lunch program and all of these things, and then he was a friend of presidents. I mean, people in Washington D.C. when they wanted their Google, they could dial up Senator Russell, and he could come and give the institutional knowledge that needed, and presidents and other senators leaned on him because they knew he was solid, and he knew.
6 presidents, I believe, if my math is correct.
Well, yeah, but he was their Google before there was Google, so.
You were talking about how, because of the archives and the building and the library, what do you think is the greatest achievement of the Russell Foundation? Is it a thing? Is it an organization, or is it, like you said, that legacy of preserving Georgia's past?
It preserves history, but it is a living, breathing thing for people forever to come and educate themselves. It is, how many square feet in this building?
114, 112,000?
Well, let's call it 100,000 square. It's
Yeah.
it's 100,000 square foot classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Senator Russell would be very proud that his name is on a 100,000+ square foot classroom, that generation after generation after generation will come. And my prayer is that when Cheryl does retire after 75 years with the library, that the next person will be equally as good, because she has been the shepherd, the steward over these resources. I like to hear Cheryl. I hope you're going to film her for 3 days and get her stories, because
that's the plan anyway.
When we were hurry, don't be late. She talked about Billy Stuckey, who was my congressman when I was living in Jessup, about going into his chicken coops and digging out records. I mean, not many people would be that persistent. I called Cheryl and said, Cheryl, Senator Roscoe Emory Dean Jr., who was an infamous state senator from Jessup.
It's a fine word for.
They're selling his building, his family's building, and they're throwing his stuff out the second-story window into a dumpster. Cheryl, Roscoe was an interesting piece of work, but he's got some real good historical documents. So she came down twice in a van, and we loaded up stuff. A lot of people said we don't have time for that, but she raced like it was Christmas morning. She came 210 miles down the road, and we loaded up a lot of good stuff that can be researched for generations to come. It's right down there.
That's right. So I was actually, Randy Knuckles and I were down with Congressman Stuckey. There are no chicken coops on Sea Island, not that I saw anyways.
Right. Now, this was in Eastman where they went.
Yeah.
She went to Eastman.
The sheds and the outbuildings, and Cheryl's got some war stories when it comes to.
She does. There's a whole documentary there.
That's right. That's right. And as you said, that's the plan anyway. If you can pull her away from all the documents and emails to get down here and do this. So, if there was something, in your mind, if you had your druthers and you were chairman of the Russell Foundation again, is there anything that you would like to see added to the Russell Foundation's mission? or see it expand into a new area if it could, if it had those
I
resources?
really can't. I remember in typing class in the 10th grade, we typed, keep on keeping on. I mean, that's, I think that would be my phrase is stencil that on the back of our hands, keep on keeping on, because
Right.
you're doing good. Yeah, you have to grow and you have to consider new whatevers.
Sure.
You can't be stagnant. If you got to be green and growing, or if you stop being green and growing, you're going to die. Well, we got to trust our leadership to know when and what to do, and I'm fully confident they will.
This is something I always ask folks, and it's interesting to talk to the people who worked for Senator Russell to ask this question. But do you think there will be a time where the name Richard Russell will become more of a detriment than a boon? That the name and how it's perceived by some in the public.
Well, I don't want to get off on that
Sure.
tangent, but it's so easy through lens of 2023 to look back to 1940 and say, how in the world could they do that? What, that's stupid. Well, in 2075, they're going to be looking at 2023 and say, what were those people thinking? What were they thinking? So I think it's unfair to try to judge through today's lens yes, we know things weren't as good as they should have been. There's things that we aren't proud of, but I think you look at, like in Major League Baseball, you look at the batting average, your batting average, and Russell's got a pretty good batting average. Of course, he's a big baseball fan too.
He's a very big baseball fan.
So,
one of the finest collections of
cards.
dead ball era baseball cards in the country.
Absolutely, but yeah, I think you look at the batting. I mean, you look at. We look at Dr. Martin Luther King, one of the greatest Americans ever. But if you put the microscope there, there's some things that we aren't exactly proud of, but his batting average is extremely high, and we're grateful that he came into the lives of Americans to do. So you can take John Kennedy. I mean, he did some fabulous things, but if you put the microscope to his personal life, there's some things you'd say, well, you know. So look at the batting average. You look at Senator Russell's batting average, and he made some good things happen in America.
As we're wrapping up, what would you like to see the foundation, apart from keeping on, what would you like to see for the future of the foundation or the makeup of the foundation? What's the future look like in Dink NeSmith's mind?
Well, one of the things that I remember being a part of were bringing in young leaders to the board. It doesn't need to be a board of just old gray foxes, male or female, either way. I mean, you need less gray hair and more younger leadership, visionaries, to keep it alive. Because if we're all 70 plus, you know, we got, as my mother would say, we got more time behind us than we got ahead of us. So we need to gradually diminish the numbers of us and increase the numbers of those that are going to be here for a while.
Maybe there's a lesson for Congress there too.
Well, I think I don't know about term limits, but it's I think that some of the old folks, and I'm one of them, ought to ease themselves over to the sideline and let the next generations come, because as Dr. Fannin said, only words live forever, and we need to, that's how we keep the legacy fresh, green, and growing.
Well, speaking of words, do you still write a column regularly?
Yes,
or?
yes, I do. My rule is, and this is my 52nd or 3rd year, I don't go to bed on Sunday night unless my weekly column is written, And I have, I don't know how many thousand that makes.
Due dates are still sacred, huh?
Yeah, I keep, even though I'm retired officially from community newspapers, and our 50-year-old son is now chairman of the board, I want to feel the pressure of a deadline. I never in my life have asked any of our associates to do anything that I'm not willing to do or have done plenty myself, and therefore by continuing to write, I'm demonstrating to myself and maybe to them, so this is what we do. This is what we do.
Right.
And I have 3 books in the works. The Last Man to Let You Down, Daddy the Undertaker, is of course been out, but I have going to press this fall. Thank You for Telling Me No, and it's a compilation of a couple of dozen times people have told me no, you can't do that, and then what you turned it in.
I have to get a copy for my 8-year-old daughter.
Well, that would be good. And then I have a book I'm waiting on the final lap chapter. I've been involved since 2016 in a coal ash fight.
That's right.
And I've written more than 130 columns on that. And 350 pages of the book is done, but I'm waiting on the victory lap. The name of it is Kicking Ash and Taking Names.
It's a good title.
It's coming, and I commissioned a cartoonist. Jim Powell has drawn more than 100 cartoons for me. And then the 3rd book that's in the works is You Die Twice. The second time stories stop. And it's a compilation of maybe 100 pieces that I've written about people I knew who have died. And it'll probably have maybe a dozen eulogies just as a sample that I've done. It seems like I'm doing eulogies often. I think I've got 5 on deck requested now. But again, I want people to live, the memories of them to live forever. So, yeah.
Well, in part of that is your papers will be preserved here at the Russell Library, down in that 30,000 square foot vault underground, which is the showcase of any tour of the building, which we're always very proud to show off. But Dink, thank you very much for everything that you've done for the Russell Foundation, the Russell Library, and the University of Georgia more broadly. We'd be hard pressed to find somebody who's done more on different leadership boards here in UGA than you.
Well, thank you very much. I will add just one anecdote. Jim Minner is a dear friend. He's 93. He lives in Fayette County. He's a Georgia graduate. He is retired executive editor of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and he and Ann have a home on St. Simon's at King and Prince. And years ago, he stopped by Jessup on the way. A lot of friends did that because I said,
Sure.
free Coca-Colas and clean restrooms at the newspaper. Come on by. But Jim stopped by, and I wasn't there at that particular moment. But he saw my father on the curb, so he was talking to people in Jessup called him Big Dink. And he says, Mr. NeSmith, I know you're mighty proud of your boy. And he said, well, he's all right. He's done good. And he said, but Mr. Minner, I was concerned about when he went to the University of Georgia. He said, I don't know if he had time to get an education because he joined everything but the AME church and the women's glee club. He says, I don't know how I had time to go to class. Well, I believe in getting involved and making a difference and doing what you can. And the University of Georgia is a part of my DNA. All 3 of our children met their spouses at the University of Georgia. We have 10 degrees among the 8 of us. And on the day our 8 grandchildren were born, I paid for them lifetime memberships in the UGA Alumni Association. So it's important. If you tried to rip UGA from my soul. It sounded like a 50-yard piece of Velcro stripping back. It's in me. UGA's been good to me, and I intend to continue as long as I'm breathing to give back.
Well, I appreciate that, and there are countless other people that we don't even know who also have benefited from that. So Dink, thank you so much for taking some time out of your Thursday morning to talk some history, to knock some of the dust off the cobwebs.
Well, thank you very much. I would like to tell you just one more story,
Oh,
if you don't mind.
Recording stories is my job.
And this is UGA related.
Yes.
Because I want to tell you. And I retired in the summer of 21. It lasted for 65 days. I got a call that the Oglethorpe Echo.
That's right. That's right.
Oglethorpe Echo was closing. I'd been writing a column. We sold our home in 5 Points, and in fact, President Moorhead owns our home in 5 Points. It used to be our house. And we moved to Smithonia to a farm, and the owner of the Oglethorpe Echo, a 148-year-old newspaper, called and said, I wanted you to know that in 2 weeks I'm closing the newspaper. He had had a stroke. He had limited staff.
Right.
And I said, gosh, Ralph, gosh. So I went to bed. That was maybe on Monday night. Well, I said, I'll go see him, and he'll let him get his paper out. But something told me at 5 o'clock the next morning, you need to get yourself down to Lexington, Georgia. So I got up early and I walked in, and Ralph was writing the story for the front page that week to say he was closing the newspaper. I said, Ralph, I need to see you in that office, your daddy's office. His daddy's been dead years. I said, you need to go in there. I said, you can't close the newspaper. You can't. He said, why? I said, well, one, the community needs it. Two, your parents are in heaven and they're watching and they're not going to be happy about this. Well, what you going to do by it? I said, no, Ralph, if I'd kept them all, we'd have about 60. I don't need another one. Well, what you going to do? I said, I'm going to convince you not to close this newspaper. Well, what you going to do? I said, and I looked at the ceiling. I said, Ralph, we're going to form a nonprofit, and I want you to donate your newspaper to this nonprofit, and I'll run it. And my check will be the first one in the nonprofit. We'll form a 501c3. And he said, what you going to do then? I said, Ralph, you've been thinking about this a long time. I just learned of it. I said, the devil's in the details. Give me just a little bit of time. I walked out to my truck and I punched a button. I call her Matilda. She's in my dash. You punch this button. I said, Matilda, call Charles Davis. Charles Davis, the dean of the journalism college. I said, Charles, I got an idea. What is it? I said, I've just formed a nonprofit, in the process of forming a nonprofit, and we're going to take over the Oglethorpe Echo, and I want to turn it into a real-life laboratory for your students, and I want the students to be the reporters, and this will give them a chance to put a gold star on their diplomas to say, we're tested and we'll feel ready and we can go to work as journalists. He said, I love it. I said, Charles, the devil's in the details, but we got 2 weeks to get it figured out.
Oh.
And we scrambled and did it, and today we've had more than 100 Grady College interns come through, and the paper is flourishing. We'll be 150 years old, the newspaper, in November, and we'll put out a special edition, and maybe then I might go back to the farm, but yet it's been one of the best things of my career to watch these students engage in real life opportunities, and the community loves its newspaper.
How does, in the last question, and I'll stop talking, but how does the Oglethorpe Echo and the Red and Black work? Do you have people who work at both?
No, this is all, because the Red and Black is separate. That's an independent.
Yeah.
We had, Kate Hoffman was a foundation fellow. She's graduated from UGA, but she was in our first group that came, and she had traveled all over the world as a foundation fellow. And she was speaking to a group at the Grady College near the end of her term here. She said, I've been a foundation fellow. I've been I've experienced fabulous educational opportunities all over the world, but the best educational experience I've ever had was working at the Oglethorpe Echo. Boom. That was the vision, and it's worked.
Well, Dink, thank you so much, and thank you for what you've done for Grady College, the University of Georgia, Richard B. Russell Library, Richard B. Russell Foundation. I don't believe for one instant you'll ever stay retired, but you know, we can always talk about it and think about it.
Sure. I got two speeds wide open and off.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you again, sir.